Well, good evening, everyone. Let's, of course, make sure that everything is up and running correctly. And away we go. And we're live. Good. Okay. All right. That's good. Okay, so this is the. Good. Everything's working there, too, on YouTube. Okay, so first of all, hello, everyone who is a premium member, and hello to those watching on YouTube. Thank you for joining this evening. So, I wanted to do a special live video chat uh, pertaining to what's going on with climate change and whatnot, and kind of give you a balanced approach. If you're looking to hear about the end of the world, you're going to be disappointed. If you're here looking to for reassurance that we can use oil and gas with no consequences, you're going to be disappointed. But I'm going to also give you some really good news and break down everything that's actually in the report. We're not going to walk through the entire report because that's like over 150 pages. And although I read the whole thing, it's some really good information, and I've put the link in the bottom. So I would strongly suggest reading it. You don't have to agree with everything. I'm not asking you to agree with everything, but I want to give you my take on it because I know that a lot of you guys trust me, and you trust what I feel is going on. We'll also talk about the thunderstorms that are moving through right now. Let's pull that up real fast. And a nice little vigorous line here that's moving through. Once again, much like yesterday, is producing quite a bit of rain and some vivid lightning. The Mets actually did a smart thing and decided to wait for this all to move through rather than try to start the game and blow it. So there you go on that respect. But I know a lot of you guys came here to learn about what I was thinking with the climate. So let's get right into it. I'm going to knock this out. Now, again, all the information is in the links I've been sharing on Twitter and on the YouTube page. You can find it on my Twitter feed. It's actually linked right up on the top, exactly where I'm getting all this data, which is the report itself. I will have to say this. This is the first time that I've seen them do this report where they actually can go back to the raw data. They've done it where they've given the data that they worked with and the equations, but never the raw data. So you could go back and work on all of that and work it out yourself if you have the computing power, which I really appreciate because um, when it comes to science, you want to have all the raw data, okay, to recreate what was found. So I'm going to reference back to these chapters when we're talking about the various features. Then, when I'm done, I'm going to answer your questions that premium members have been putting out there, and also I will be happy to just to see what's going on in the chat room here as well. Uh, I know one person is very active. I see, so we'll cover that as well. But let me give you a breakdown of everything that's happening. Again, I'm going to reference back to these chapters that are laid out here. And what's really important about these chapters is that it gives a detailed analysis of exactly what is in this report, so that way you have a better understanding. And I'm going to explain to you why sometimes I let's just say get a little bit upset when I see some climate studies based on some of the data that they're using. Okay, so let's walk through exactly what these charts mean. Now, what they did, they started off from 1850 to 1900. The reason why they started 1850 is for two reasons. One is the farthest you can go back with reliable observational data. And when I say reliable, I mean that there is some sort of check. Okay, it's not anything near to what we have today. Okay, point blank, it's not. But it's the start of the 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 I guess you could call it the trusted meteorological database. Okay, is it perfect? No. And a lot of this data is backed up by what we found in tree rings, ice cores, and information like that. Is it 100%? No, it's not. Okay, point blank, it's not. If you go back further, will you have warmer periods? Yes. Yes, you will. The difference between our warmer period and what's happening now, and this really came to fruition, especially after I'd say 2010, is, at least for me, is the rate of temperature rise. Okay? It's not so much how warm we are, it's the rate in which we're warming. With that being the case, this does not mean that the world's going to blow up or that it's going to burn down or anything of that nature. People running around saying that we're going to turn into Venus are out of their damn mind. Okay? But it's clear that we have an influence. And I've been saying this for God for over 20 years. All right? CO2 output is like steroids. Okay? If you go to the gym, okay, and you lift, you're going to get stronger. Okay? You're going to get big muscles. If you take a steroid, you're going to get stronger. You're going to get bigger muscles because it's an enhancement. The problem with steroids and the problem with injecting more CO2 in the atmosphere is that your body is not meant to handle the rate at which you grow. And so you start getting torn ligaments and you start getting very, very weird injuries. Well, in the climate, when you start to push that CO2 sink, which you can learn about and reference back on chapter 5, they do a good job of explaining the CO2 sink. CO2 does give way in that sink, right? So it's not forever. But if you keep on putting out CO2, you're going to overwhelm the sink. Okay, so think of it like you have a sink and a sink in your bathroom, right? And you have a drain, and you start clogging that drain and turning the water up full, and then the drain becomes overwhelmed. That's basically what's happening here. Okay, so that is what's causing this spike. Now again, when they went back and measured the natural causes of warming compared to what we would normally expect. Let me pull up that chart. I know it's around here somewhere. We'll go over all this stuff in a moment, but this is a really cool chart. Let's see if I can find it. They did a chart where they were showing our aerosols. And of course, now I can't find it because it was a really good chart. But I'm going to find it because I think this is a really important factor in explaining what is happening here. Of course not. Okay, so not a problem. We'll download this. Okay, so what I want to do is go over and explain. Yeah, here we are. The forcing mechanisms. So this is chapter 3, and the forcing mechanisms that we are dealing with here. I know it's around here somewhere. Okay, I'll find it. I apologize. But what they found in the forcing mechanisms when they were studying the difference between natural variability in the climate and our influences is that, oh, here it is. Oh, perfect. I blew right past it. This right here is our pollution and aerosols. This is cooling. This is CO2 and methane. This is CO2 and this is methane. These are the warming factors. Now, what's interesting, and I'm going to shoot myself because I know I had it in here somewhere, and I am going to find it because it was really good information. Um, the key that was very interesting in the evolution of our warming and cooling in the atmosphere, and I'm going to kick myself. I'm going to have to find it later. Well, figures. The the influences of our climate that they did based on the sun and volcanoes over the past 250 years is pretty small, about a quarter. Okay, the warming that we've seen via CO2 has allowed us to warm above 1 degree Celsius. The reason why is because we've overwhelmed our sink. Now, here is why I usually run into a lot of criticisms with a lot of the climate change individuals out there putting out the worst case scenarios. Worst case scenarios is this right here, very high CO2. Okay, every one of them, every one of those episodes. All right, it's called the 8.5 scenario. 8.5, these two, high and very high, make the assumption that we're going to all go back to coal, which doesn't make any sense because even under, in terms of American politics, even under the Trump administration, when you had very favorable assumptions, very favorable support for coal and natural gas, wind and solar still gained. So when you took the inhibiting factors for coal lost out. The only place where coal actually did well was in China, which don't get me started on them. So these two scenarios are very much unlikely, very high and high. Okay, not because of anything you believe politically, but because of technology. I want you guys to think about this for a second. 20 years ago, or 21 years ago, I was in college, right? It was around 2000, right? And what did we have? We just had the internet. We barely had phones, cell phones. We didn't have the iPhone yet. The idea of having solar panels on your home was more for like multimillionaires. The idea of an electric car came out of something like from Star Trek The Next Generation. In fact, Star Trek The Next Generation featured the first iPad, really. So, um, we didn't have any inkling about the ability to develop better nuclear technology, better wind technology, clean coal, if you want to call it that, better abilities for our cars to drive cleaner, to reduce CO2 output. My point is that technology has been jumping by leaps and bounds to make this solution up here, very high and high, nearly impossible, which means all of the worst case scenarios that you keep on reading about in the news, the melting of the ice caps, the Antarctica melting, and New York City going underwater, and the Gulf Stream collapsing, stuff like that, is all based on this solution, which is not going to happen because our technology is advancing in such a way, and don't even get me started on fusion, that it makes those solutions nearly impossible. So when you see stuff on the news and when you read the reports, the minute they say they based it off of 8.5, which is this right here, it's bunk. It's garbage because that's not the reality we live in. The reality we live in is really intermediate to low in terms of future output. Now, I personally am very excited to see what's going to happen in the future. Okay. I'm seeing stuff like electric cars, which actually is starting to look pretty viable. I am looking at the fact that in New Jersey, when I was 18, the idea of having solar panels on your roof was like, again, multimillionaire stuff. Now it's all over the place. So I am far more optimistic about our future, in that you don't need to have overreaching authority, let's just say, to get where we need to be. We do need to have technological advancements. Now, with that said, even in these scenarios, there are factors that we're going to have to deal with as our climate does warm. And this, again, is separate from um, factors like the sun, which I know a lot of people go on and on about the grand solar minimum. Um, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, know that the grand solar minimum idea has very poor support. Okay, right now, there is the idea that we could be moving into a grand solar minimum, but right now the data isn't there. Okay, if we continue on over the next 50 years where we have a low solar output, then we'll start to approach that. But understand that the low solar minimum idea and the grand solar minimum idea takes decades to start to unravel. Okay, whereas what we're doing with the CO2 output is having more and more of an influence. And again, I'm going to answer all your questions and take everything in. All right, so and answer all your questions because that's what this is all about. Okay, so I really though wanted to drive that home, that the worst case scenario, and again, when you read this report, focus on climate change information, regional outputs, out impacts, weather and climate extreme events in changing climate. Those two are really important because what they basically state is what we're actually able to prove is changing in our climate. Okay, so let me pull up. There it is. Okay, so you want a specific example of climate change influence. The first two areas I would point to is this area here and this area up here, the Arctic. The Arctic is where you're going to see the fastest changes. Okay, this is where you're going to have your strongest influences, and this is where even last winter, where I was talking about the sea ice, I was very candid and said, "Look, I've never seen this before. We had no sea ice whatsoever up there, and how that would influence the high latitude blocking." So that's one factor. This factor out here in the Western Atlantic, this very warm water out here, this is usually something that we start to see break down as we go through our PDO changes. But we haven't seen that break down in 10 years. That is very unusual. And based on what we've taken on studies with salinity and ice cores from these regions and some rock cores from the Pacific, and also what's a coral, okay? We know that this should have shifted a little bit. So these are tangible things that we've seen. I do want to say there is literally no support and no data whatsoever of anything negative happening in the Atlantic of the AMOC collapsing. None. Zero. Zip zilch. Okay? That's really important because if the AMOC actually did collapse, that would be very bad. Okay? Very, very bad. Okay? You could say goodbye to Europe with that. It would just freeze over. Okay? So that would be a very worst case scenario. Thing is that we're nowhere near the worst case scenario. So if that was to happen, believe me, I'd be freaking out. But there is literally no observational data to support that. But there is observational data here and here. So the very warm waters here have a tangible influence on our weather and what we're seeing. Now, when it comes to weather impacts that we can prove without a doubt, we have to go back to something that I've been talking a lot about. And you guys know I've been harping about this forever on Twitter and on in our premium chats, and that is precipitable water values. Precipitable water values have fundamentally changed. Okay, there's literally no doubt about it. And the thing that I love about precipitable water values is that I don't need to worry about the surface observations. My big pet peeve with the whole climate change discussion was that they were focusing way too much on the surface temperatures. And the problem with the surface temperatures is that there are way too many variables that can alter and influence the discussion. So, for example, when some knucklehead puts an observation area near an airport and you have that enhancement, well, that's how you get your Newark spike of 104 degrees when everyone else is around 98. But precipitable water value, because you're taking the whole compass of the atmosphere from about, let's say, about 300 millibars down to roughly 950 millibars, you get a better idea of what the atmosphere composition is like and the moisture that it can hold. So the warmer the atmosphere, the more moisture it can hold. The more moisture that you can hold, the more dynamic your weather systems can be. So I have been keeping a very, very close eye on precipitable water values and noting them. And when you start getting these anomalies here that we're seeing right now this evening, this used to be more connected with tropical low pressure systems, not troughs of low pressure with a Bermuda high. Our Bermuda high systems used to be associated with, about 1.5, 1.7 in precipitable water. Now we're easily breaking past 2. So that leads to a tangible impact, and that enhances our low pressure systems, and it also enhances the nature of the amplification of the polar jet stream. This also has led to an enhancement in our negative EPO pattern, which when you combine that with our, where are you? With our negative EPO pattern that's showing, I'm trying to say negative PDO pattern, leads to our enhancement of our western drought. Now, I want to make this very clear. Climate change is not causing the western drought. Climate change is enhancing the western drought. This drought that's going on in the western United States is driven by a natural evolution in our pattern that has happened many times over the past 2,000 to 3,000 years. Problem is that we've built in the wrong places, we haven't managed our forests, and we haven't managed our water. So that's how you end up with what we have. Fires all over the place. Because of urban heat island effect, you're having incredibly high temperatures in the Pacific Northwest. And because we haven't managed our water, like doing desalination, you are having major water issues. So instead of maybe building a high-speed train and some golf courses, probably should have focused on that. And we knew about this for decades. But sometimes you don't use common sense. So when it comes to severe weather events, we know that there's an enhancement in fire danger. We know that there's enhancement in the high latitude blocking, or the evolution of the polar jet stream. We know that based on the precipitable water values. We know that the rainfall rates have been enhanced. And we know that because we can look at the precipitable water values, which we can also go back and confirm that with the water vapor satellite picture. And you can run the calculations yourself. Again, definitely check out chapter 9 and Chapter 8, especially Chapter 8, the water cycle. They'll give you the exact calculations and they'll give you the raw data and the equations to punch in yourself so you could see it yourself. I'd go through it with you, but that's about another 160 pages. So you want to take some time to read all of that through. Sea level changes, marginal support in that, okay, based on their own data. Okay, the reason why is because what you're seeing in a lot of these reports again is the idea that worst case scenario is going to happen. And in that worst case scenario, you melt all the sea caps, you melt Antarctica, and yeah, then everyone's underwater because you melted all the ice. It's not so much the Arctic, which is already water already. It's when you try to melt Antarctica. Yeah, that would lead to a lot of flooding. Thing is that, again, that scenario is not happening, and so we're seeing a steady sea level rise. We're seeing a enhancement in that rise because of how we're building throughout the world when we're altering the coastlines and whatnot. But we're not seeing anything that would support the idea of, let's say, Louisiana being completely underwater or New York City being completely underwater. That is bunk. Okay, we're seeing a sea level rise. We'll likely see more coastal flooding. Combine that with the heavy rainfall, but the worst case scenario again is bunk. Things that have shown no support of changes. Winter storms, zero support of any type of meaningful change in terms of intensity of winter storms. Tropical systems, even though we constantly see this idea that they're going to be enhanced, the raw data and the data that they worked on had low confidence of proving any type of change. Same thing with severe weather. In fact, we've seen a decrease in tornadoes developing and severe thunderstorms developing. So that is certainly interesting. We've seen a decrease in that. Not sure why. That's still being studied, but that's definitely what has been showing up. Other things that have been enhanced that have high probability would definitely be the heat waves. The heat waves have been enhanced by our urban heat island and how we've built our cities, which is trapping a lot more humidity into the cities and causing warmer low temperatures, which causes higher high temperatures, which is why we're seeing what we're seeing in terms of our heat waves. The duration of the heat waves have not expanded, but the intensity of them have. And the reason why we're seeing that intensity is, again, you're increasing your 500 millibar heights. When your 500 millibar heights rise because your stratosphere is cooling, that causes that evolution of your heat wave being rather intense. Okay. Now, again, you have to factor in urban heat island effect with that. So, my overall look on this, to summarize everything, yes, and here, hold it. Let me put my ugly mug on here. Yes, we do influence the climate. And then I'm going to answer all your questions. We do influence the climate. We have enhanced the warming. The warming is much stronger than what it would have been if we just had no technology. But understand that with that warming, we've gotten houses, we've gotten technology, we've gotten vaccines, which is kind of important in the middle of a pandemic. We've gotten the ability to cool our houses, educate ourselves, eat. And by the way, all those people who love like all their vegan food and all that stuff, you wouldn't be able to get that without the technology that we used to get here. So yes, we've definitely warmed the planet, but at the same time, the trade-off is that we're living longer, we have better quality of life. Is the world going to end? No, not in 10 years, 15 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years. Okay, Earth is going to be fine. We will adapt. Will we get warmer? Probably, but nowhere near the worst case scenarios. Which is why whenever someone says, well, we use 8.5 to build this study, that's when I say bullshit. Because as far as I can tell, we're not building coal plants in our backyards anymore. We were doing that. That is passe. Okay, the technology is leaving that behind, and the only countries that are really investing more in coal technology is essentially China. I have to say it, China, Southeast Asia. In our country and in most of North America, coal is really starting to be phased out. That's not anything political, it's just a technology. Okay? We're in the same technological bubble that when we went from horse and buggy to cars. I have nothing against horses. I have nothing against people that take care of horses or use them to drive around. I have nothing against the Amish, but look, everyone likes the car better. Technology is better. Um, I am far more optimistic about our future, not because of any political party that may or may not be in, or because of the idea that I'm never uh, going to see the worst case scenario. It's because of the way that we have grown our technology, guys. We are on the precipice of some amazing technological advances in solar, not so much wind, but definitely solar, battery storage, um, and nuclear, especially fusion. And based on the way that our technology has evolved just in the past 10 years, from battery storage to what we're driving to all that stuff, to being able to have solar panels on our houses, um, I honestly believe we are going to be fine, and that we're not in a climate crisis. Okay, we are growing and maturing, and if you want to call human race, we're teenagers right now. We're trying to learn how to do things better. But if you're going to say, "Oh, we shouldn't," we cause all this warming because we're bad, understand that we wouldn't have any technology that we have today to be able to address these problems without going through using fossil fuels. But I don't see it, and I base this off of not any political ideology, but understanding how we evolve with technology and things I'm reading like on physics daily and physics. I get like these periodicals sent to me every month, everything with physics, energy storage, and I'm seeing this technology, and I honestly believe in it. So this is not a negative approach or a negative story for you guys, because I'm honestly thinking that we will solve this problem, and we won't need to basically hurt our economy to do it. I honestly believe that, based on what I'm seeing on technology. In full disclosure, as someone, in case someone may ask for investments and whatnot, yeah, I do invest in green technology. I've been doing that since I was 18 years old. Um, and I also invest in Exxon because I'm not an idiot. I know that people drive and they need to drive their cars, you know. But I do think that I am very, very much confident on what is evolving in that respect. So with that, I am going to take some of your questions here, um, and I'm going to first. I wanted to just cover this point from Fled Weather about the. You guys may have heard, and I really wanted to cover this real fast. Where is it? Uh, okay, the USHCN data. The UN, okay, the USHCN data is basically the climate data for the United States, and it shows very little change in our temperatures, right? And let me pull this up here. I'm pretty sure I have it. Right here. Ah, here it is. Okay, let me pull this up real fast. Okay, so what that data is a tabulation of our temperatures and then the average for the continental United States, which is in the mid latitudes. Okay, so let me go right here. So that is the mid latitudes right here. Up to this point with climate change, the bulk of your strongest temperature anomaly changes are not in the mid latitudes. It's not going to be around the United States, although you'll see some enhancement with our high temperatures and extremes. But really, the bulk of the changes and the bulk of the enhancement that's causing these temperature spikes are in the Arctic and in the Antarctic. Okay, especially in the Arctic. And the reason why is because the Arctic is where you have your most steady state environment. Okay, the mid latitudes is where you have mixing of all your air masses. So you're going to get your smallest change in that respect in those areas. That's why you see the USHCN has barely changed over the past 200 years. Give or take about what? About 0.25 degrees, which is pretty much what you would expect in this environment, in this scenario. So, yes, you're absolutely right that that data is showing that. Not going to disagree with you at all. The problem is that you can't just look at the USHCN data and take that for the entire globe, because that isn't how the atmosphere works. Okay? Now, understand the strongest warming in the Arctic, it's still pretty freaking cold in the Arctic, and you're still going to have snow in Arctic air masses. But if you're talking about the largest change, that is where you're going to see it, because the Arctic is where you're going to have your most steady state environment. So that's why you're seeing what you're seeing, and I think that that data goes back to 1895, but you can find the raw data going back to 1870, but it's not as reliable beyond before 1895. So let's see here. So I guess like my overall theme is that guys, there's no reason to be afraid. I'm not. I am never one to go around and scare people. I don't believe in that. I think that it hurts. I think the reason why we haven't made the advancements that we should have already, i.e., nuclear, we've gone nuclear. We would have solved this shit 20 years ago. Okay, so it makes me so angry because if we just stayed away from the hysteria and the nonsense of us being underwater and the world's going to blow up and we're all going to burn up and everyone's going to die, if we just stayed away from all that crap and just was clear-minded and calm, this is not a very difficult problem to solve, because all we really need to do is adjust our ability to generate energy. And because of the advancements that we're seeing, I believe we're going to do it. And that's why even in this report, the worst case scenario, which is this up here, is very much unlikely. And that's why I get so angry on Twitter. Because they produce studies based on scenarios that are not going to happen. Okay? It would be like if you said the New York Mets are going to win the NL East because they're going to score 10 runs per game. You and I both know they're not scoring 10 runs per game. That may be their high water mark. They might do it every once in a blue moon, but they're not going to do it every game. That is what these guys are saying. That the Mets are going to score 10 runs every game and they're going to win every game from here on out. That's what that is. And as a Met fan, you can understand how annoyed that can make me when someone says that. Because I know it's not true, it's just false BS. So what is more reliable is intermediate and low. Very low, the only way you get very low is two things. One, you get fusion energy, in which then everyone drives electric cars and it doesn't impact quality of life. In fact, it improves quality of life. And two, we perfect carbon capture to such a way that we balance it so that we don't hurt our environment by collecting too much. If we get that point, I think that then you can get your very low. But I don't see that. But I would say very low is far more likely over the next 50 years than very high and high. Just because even without all any government mandates or anything like that, our technology is naturally moving in that direction. So now I'm going to answer your questions, and also we'll check on the thunderstorms that are currently moving through. Let's see what we got here, um, and then I'll answer all your questions. Okay, so as expected, our thunderstorms are starting to weaken while they're heading towards the coast. The Mets probably did a bright thing by waiting until this rain passes by. So it looks like they'll probably only play after 10 o'clock. Um, but yeah, it's going to be a wet evening once again. Get used to it. It's going to be like that all the way until Sunday morning. Meanwhile, let's see. Anything new with tropical depression? Fred is looking less Freddy Krueger-ish, let's just say. It's not looking very, very impressive at all. The low-level center is basically moving right over the Dominican Republic and heading towards Haiti, and that's pretty much where all your mountainous terrain is. There's a chance that so low-level circulation might not even survive this. But if it does, it gets to around here. If you have friends and family around Florida, you might want to keep an eye on this. Because if it gets into this area and is able to utilize some of this very warm water, things can get pretty interesting. We'll have to see how that impacts going forward. So let's see here. Let's answer some questions. And I'll also go back to the YouTube chat and see what you guys have to say and go from there as well. And answer some of those questions as well. All right. So from Card Shark, who is a premium member, note that Biden called for OPEC to increase oil production today, so apparently more fossil fuels use is good if OPEC produces it, bad if we do. Okay, all right. So here's the thing, okay? The idea that you could just cut off fossil fuels is so ridiculously stupid because literally our whole economy is based on it. But there's a way to get off of fossil fuels, but it's not going to be tomorrow. Why? Because everyone drives a car, and all your stuff is driven by trucks or trains or boats. All that's driven by fossil fuels. The good news, though, is that we have developed engines that are starting to come online that are now commercially viable that can be run via electricity. Bad news. The electricity, because some knuckleheads don't like nuclear and you can't produce enough energy for solar, means you have to go back to natural gas or coal or oil to run your power plants. So the electric car idea sounds nice, but if you really want it to work properly, then you really have to go nuclear. You do. Sorry. There's no way around it. Look, I would love for solar panels to run perfectly, all right, and to solve this problem 100% because then I could retire because my 401k would be freaking awesome. But that just isn't reality. Sorry. It is what it is. But yeah, OPEC is going to have to increase and go from there. See what happens. And by the way, there is more to that than just energy. There's always politics involved. This is why I'm not a politician, because I just run up there with a bat to Congress and say, what in the hell's wrong with you people? Did you decide that on Saturday? Did you notice that on Saturday, NASCAR halted his truck race at Watkins Glen, not because of rain, but lightning within 8 miles track? Why does MLB not do that? That is an excellent question. I wish they would. MLB really needs to get on the game when it comes to lightning. I applaud the NASCAR for doing that. Um, Ironically, NASCAR is safer than MLB in that environment. So hopefully they do. Let's see. Carlos right. Roger Pellick has some great criticism of the report. Yeah, he was fair. He also said that the report, right, by the way, was probably one of the most balanced ones that they've produced. So there are some criticisms, as there always are. But overall, I think that this one, I really, really do think you guys need to read that report completely. You know how I rant and rave against things like stripes, which I think is incredibly misleading. And also, um, I'm really much against like the worst case scenario ideas. But I'm really impressed with this report. I think they did a fair job. There are physicists who specialize in gases who assert the CO2 greenhouse gas impact is overstated, especially given that gases in the atmosphere impact the same wavelength of radiation. This again from Card. Okay, so there's a great debate right now with CO2 in terms of the sensitivity. And I've brought this up myself. There is definitely debate. The problem is that we've put out enough CO2 in the atmosphere to, at the very least, make it very clear that we're having an influence. The question that a lot of physicists are debating is how long does the CO2 molecule remain stable in such an environment that it continues to have that impact? And how well are the climate models handling that impact? That factor is very much still debatable, which makes, again, the worst case scenario more unlikely, and makes the other scenarios more likely. With that being the case, if you keep on putting out CO2 and don't allow the older CO2 to disintegrate and to go back into the sink, then you overwhelm the sink. You understand what I'm saying? So yes, there's definitely a debate in terms of the 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 sensitivity in the atmosphere, but not so much to negate everything that's been happening. Does the IPCC address that criticism or pretend it doesn't exist? Some do within the organization. The IPCC is at the heart a political organization. This is why I say read the raw report, not go to some guys on TV from the UN or your XYZ TV station, whether that's Fox or NBC or CNN. You go to those stations, you're going to get their political point of view. And then they mix science into it. Go to the actual report and then read what they're confident of, what they're not confident of. That is how you're supposed to read this report. And when you do that, then you have a better understanding of what should and should not be taken from this report. Okay? Science. Remember, the way that scientists write, especially the technical report, is not to win a political argument or a policy argument. It's to say, this is what we found, this is the data, this is what we're confident in, this is what we're not, this is why. That's it. Very straight, very Spockish. Okay? Like Star Trek, what you get is Spock. This is the truth. This is what's going on. This is what we're confident on. This is what we're not. Okay? It's when you get politics involved from either side is when everything gets all screwed up. Their conclusions are based on, the card is very active this evening. Their conclusions are based on assumptions about solar activity and volcanic emissions that are questionable and need to be scrutinized much further. Okay, so in terms of volcanoes, like if a super volcano went off, or let's say a meteor hit the Earth, would this change the forecast? Well, yeah, but you can't make that assumption like, all right, we don't have to do anything because a super volcano is going to go off. Okay, that happens once every 100,000 years? First of all, if a super volcano goes off, it's not going to matter because we're all dead anyway. Okay, it's an extinction level event. Much like if a meteor hit the Earth, it's an extinction level event. It's bye. It doesn't matter, Doesn't matter whether you pay your student loan or not. It's gone. You're by. So no, they don't factor in whether you're going to have a lot of volcanic activity. Solar activity we already went over. Right now, we're definitely seeing a decline in the solar activity, but we don't have support yet of a grand solar minimum. If you have a grand solar minimum combined with, let's say, the the reduction in our CO2 output, we definitely see a cooling in the atmosphere, which I would guess would be a good thing. So I'm fine with that. Having a little bit cooler influence. I'm trying to look for that chart because I really wanted to show you that chart about our influences. I'm going to find it one way or another while I'm answering these questions. Okay, CCP controlled China builds new coal power plants per day. Yes, they do. China is a major issue. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. China is definitely a major issue. Uh, let's see here. Let's see. They actually look in the report. They actually do not reference specifically any type of energy import. All they say is basically non-carbon and carbon, or fossil fuel, non-fossil fuel. All right. So this again is a perfect example about the UN calling for red alert. All right. This again is meant to create a emotional response and not necessarily a something that's based on the science. Um, the way I would address if it was just me, I would say, look, guys, we need to continue to invest in better technologies. But some people they don't respond to calm, cool, collective, attractive Italian males. I don't know what to tell you. It's not if you want something like that, then I should be president. Okay, we'll just go from there. But my wife doesn't want that, so we'll go from there. I can't control what the UN says. You know, I'm just telling you what the science says. Let's see. How do you charge an electric car when power is out for a week? Oh, well, that's true. How do you charge a toaster when your power is out for a week? So yeah, I mean, there's definitely, and again, not to get political, but currently right now we just put out an infrastructure bill. Hopefully that addresses things. I'm a little skeptical, but hey, I always say whoever's president, I wish them the best of luck, and I hope they're very successful. So we definitely need to address our energy infrastructure. So I'm 100% for that. Absolutely. We're not going to solve these problems without correcting our energy infrastructure. The reality will be somewhere in the middle and not any of these doomsday scenarios. That's right, James. Absolutely. Uh, if there is a climate catastrophe, how come the people making those claims build multi-million dollar mega mansions? I don't know why anyone look. I'm looking for a house now. Me and my wife. There is no way in hell I'm building near the coastline. Nope. Nope. No, thank you. And that's based on 150 years of data. I am building nowhere near the coastline. Antarctic ice has been growing, though, hasn't it? Yes, it has. There has been some calving, so you're going to definitely notice some icebergs, rather large ones, coming off of Antarctica over the next 10 years or so. But this is a natural process. There have been portions of Antarctica that have been expanding, and there's other areas that have been shrinking. This is a natural process. Cutting rainforests and reducing CO2 to O2 conversion is a big factor that needs to be addressed. I agree 100%. We need to stop cutting down rainforests. We also need to start planting more trees, which we're definitely starting to do. So we're doing all that stuff. We need to consider how we're building our cities to reduce urban heat island effect, which we're starting to address. I know that the well and lead organizations that are about environmental conditions in cities and buildings have been addressing that for the past 20 years and have been seeing improvements. We need to continue to plant more trees and all that stuff. Absolutely. The more trees you plant, the more you could take in CO2. So the more you can address that problem. Uh, yes, the Earth is getting warmer, but there's a lot of stuff going on. The solution is to not undo the industrial age. No one is talking about, well, all right, I am not talking about undoing the industrial age because you don't get to where we're at without getting to the industrial age, going through the industrial age. What I am saying is that we need to invest in better technology, and we are doing that. That's what I'm saying. Does the warm water near to the eastern seaboard, due to the negative AMO impact, uh, enhance precipitable water values from the western? This is a great question. There is some enhancement, um, but it's ironic because that would go against the AMOC collapsing idea. But there is some enhancement with that, but it wouldn't be as strong when you compare precipitable water values to the 1950s and 40s, which you could do based on water vapor equations. It's not as strong as what we're seeing now. So back then, it would be about 1.7 to 1.8 enhancement of precipitable water values around the Jersey Shore. And I did this because I had to do a report on it in college in order to graduate. So definitely I knew about this. But not like where we're at 2.2 and 2.3. Again, you're not likely going to see like we went from 0.5 to 2.2. Not that type of extreme. But when you get 2.2 and you increase it by just a little bit, that's a lot of water vapor in the atmosphere. It makes a big difference. Desalination plants, reservoirs, and forest management don't all allow politicians to grab more power. Look, we need, Cart, I'm going to say this to you with all due respect. Back off the politics and look at the solutions. I'm focusing on solutions. Um, if you want to make a meaningful change, regardless of who you want to vote for, find a company that's addressing these issues and invest in them. You become an owner, a small part, maybe you own 1%, half a percent, whatever, but that money goes a long way into addressing these problems, more so than any government program. So if you find something with Tesla or a small company working on solar power cells or uh, fusion energy, anything of that nature, I personally that's what I'm doing. So I'm going to skip some of these political questions to see. Um, does the IPCC study address urban heat island effect? Yes, they do. In chapter let's see here. They do it in chapter 11, chapter 3. Uh, excuse me. Definitely chapter 3 and chapter 6. They focus on that. Should we move to Vermont now? No, I don't like Vermont. I like New Jersey. Abundant natural gas, which emits much less CO2, is cleaner as far as particulates, is cheaper than coal, thus market forces push coal aside. Absolutely. Thing is that the next thing that's going to push natural gas aside should be nuclear and solar. That's just based on what's going on in technology and in the marketplace. Developing workable fusion power is essential to not only energy at home, but having viable space program or spice program, whichever. Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Can you comment on what's going on in the Black Sea? It's very interesting. The Black Sea setup is very interesting because what you have is upper level divergence enhancing a warm core low in the Black Sea, which is very unusual. I would compare it to what you would see in the winter with a nor'easter, where you get a warm core setup, and then that warm core setup is enveloped in a cold core low. So basically, what you have is a subtropical storm developing in the Black Sea. It's a very interesting setup. It's very, very rare. I am not familiar of any type of scenario very similar to it. I was trying to look for some new data based on that, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any. But I'll keep an eye on that. Okay. There are people that want to phase out natural gas in favor of renewable energy, but what will they do when the power goes out? Okay, so here's the thing, James. They will not change out natural gas without a reliable substitute. That's the beautiful thing about capitalism. You want to piss off your customer, you're going to be in trouble. Okay? So I don't buy for one iota that they are just going to just let people have no power. Um, the first couple of times it happens, I mean, understand this, and this is the thing I try to explain to some of my more socialist friends. We live in a generation where people flip out over the fact that Twitter went down. You telling me they're going to be okay with power outages? Come on. Come on. That isn't how the human nature works. You and I both know that. The other fundamental issue is that moderate warming is bad. It's not really an assumption. It's bad. I mean, look what's going on. Like forest fires and stuff like that. You know, um, there are some cases where it could be good in some areas, but it's bad in other areas. I don't believe in the idea that you could fix anything. Okay, the idea that we address climate change and storms disappear is complete bunk. We're still going to get storms, droughts, fires, all that stuff. We just don't want to make it worse. Okay, that's the approach. Anyone that tells you that if we do this, that this storm would never happen is full of it. Because let me tell you something. If the hurricane from 1936 hit Long Island today, Long Island was screwed then and it would be screwed now. Okay? So, regardless of what we do, we're still going to get storms. We just don't want to make them worse if we have the capability to do so. Right? Does this data take into account population growth? Scientists say 10 billion people is maximum Earth can sustain. If we don't stop increased population growth, will this make global warming more serious? I've heard about this population issue for quite some time. This goes back to when I was a little kid, when they were saying that um, if we have too many people, we're going to have starvation, all that stuff. Reality is that hasn't happened. And again, the reality is because of technology. Okay? Again, as we get more people, we're also increasing our technology. Now, obviously, as you grow your populations, you're growing your cities, you have to improve the way that you're growing, you're developing your cities. You have to improve how you are developing your food. That's why we've done a great job with GMO food, which I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories and nonsense about that, but trust me, it's good food. I like my tomatoes, thank you very much, without flies being in them. So, yeah, um, I think we'll be okay in that respect. I really do.
I just want to contribute. We also have lower birth rates.
That's true. We do have lower birth rates. That's my wife. Um, Absolutely true. Absolutely true. We're definitely seeing lower birth rates because more education, more opportunity. If any aerial flood advisory in my part of Union County went from lightning and wind. Oh yeah, that's true, Card. Yep, we actually do have some pretty nasty storms out there. Still marching their way through the region. All right. Half an inch of rain. Again, this is a great example. This storm coming through is via our enhanced precipitable warvise. Should we expect more storms tomorrow? Yes, more storms until we get to Sunday morning with the cold front. Petrol byproduct. Okay, yes, petrol byproducts have nothing to do with cars. Okay, so like for example, petrol byproduct, right? Petrol byproduct. Petrol byproduct. Yeah, but once again, technology is starting to address what do we replace with this. A lot of it is a flexible glass. Um, some aspects of it is the printing that we're doing. Um, so yeah, there's definitely that factor we're going to have to address, but we're moving in that direction, especially via recycling. Do I see that the consensus is the rainfall intensities would go up? Yes. When designing buildings, specifically storm drainage systems, would it be prudent to consider the assumptions from the intermediate scenario, how much the peak rainfall intensities increase? The codes for our region require a design of 3 inches per hour intensity. I would say we need to increase our rainfall rate intensities to address not only the current state, which if you're in New York City, we're woefully behind, and also future state. So I would say that we definitely need to address those issues. We need to address our draining issues. Absolutely, especially in major cities. Okay, you can see that in Houston, you can see that in New York City, Philadelphia, you name it. Okay, we've definitely seen more flash flooding, and part of that is because we haven't kept up our infrastructure. Water vapor increase causing the Arctic temperatures and basically in the winter months? Yes, exactly. A water vapor, well, CO2 is helping to expand the atmosphere, which is allowing a warmer atmosphere, which increases the amount of water vapor that atmosphere can hold, which is enhancing our precipitable water values. Mets are postponed. Oh, well, that's smart. I'll have to check that out. Absolutely agree in private investments. Could Newark touch 100 degrees tomorrow? Yes, it could. Do you think the warm stratospheric blob over Asia, which at least there was one last week, has any influence on the Black Sea warm core low? Um, some influence, but it's not the driver. I think it's enhancing the whole storm construct, but it's very, very volatile. And this time of year, that type of anomaly typically is not as strong of an influence. Your forecast is right on, but storms breaking out when if convective temperatures reach. We'll see that again, definitely tomorrow. Also need more permanent parking lots, and yeah, we definitely need to improve our runoff potential. Now let me check some of the YouTube guys. You guys have done a great job, and I just wanted to see if there's anything that really stands out here. What about developing economies that rely on things like coal and gas as they grow? This is from Marcus Aurelius. Um, for example, Africa. That's a great question. I do. I first of all, I believe that these economies will be able to grow, and they don't necessarily need to use coal to do it. The key is going to be our development of nuclear and wind and solar. Let me fix that. Nuclear and solar. Solar will help. We're already seeing that in parts of Nigeria and parts of Africa and parts of Southeast Asia. Nuclear, what they've actually started to do is get these nuclear power plants that are very small that you could put literally in a briefcase, um, and they're reliable. There's nothing like a Chernobyl or anything of that nature, and they're very safe. And I think that that is going to be the way to go about improving their economies. It's not going to be easy, but I think that that's the best way to go about it. I think you could do that without using coal and gas. If we don't do that, then we're going to be in trouble. But based on the investments we're seeing in these areas, it looks like we're moving in the right direction. Antarctica has cooled quite significantly in the past 30 years. It actually has not. Sorry. Um, But you do make a good point that they didn't mention anything about the Brazilian cold outbreak while we were having the heat wave. That's definitely true. Um, and it's something that I actually mentioned on Twitter several times. If we ever have a blue ocean event in the Arctic Ocean, we should see rapid warming afterward as less sunlight is reflected back out into space and the Arctic Ocean soars in the sun's energy. Yes, especially in the summer. You're absolutely right. Guys, I just want to point out we've seen temperatures reach up to 100 degrees in Siberia. Let's see here. Wow, I got a lot of questions here. I'm just trying to pick up some of the best ones here. Positive feedback loops. Yep, water products. Wow, you guys really have some great questions. This is outstanding, guys. I'm trying to pick some of the best ones. Saying that 1.5. Okay, so how much additional warming is expected moving forward? Based on the technology we have now, there it's very likely we get up to 2 degrees Celsius, but we could fall back below that. It all depends on how much technology we invest in. I don't buy the 3 degree or 4 degree scenario. Don't buy it one bit because again, we're not like popping out coal plants out in our backyards. I don't see it one bit. Half the fires in Turkey were set by arsonists. That's very true. I'm not disagreeing with that, but there are natural fires, and the fires that we have seen. I'm going to just focus specifically on the Western United States. Those fires have to happen as part of the ecological evolution of those forests. That's how you get new forests. The problem is that we've built in those forests. We haven't managed those forests very well. And when you have a dry forest with a house full of essentially tinder and you have a spark, whether it be a lightning bolt or some idiot celebrating the fact that they had a baby boy or girl, um, you end up with very significant fires. Then, because of the enhanced 500 millibar heights, you are able to dry out that atmosphere even more, which leads to a more intense fire, which leads to a whole lot of mess. So it's never one thing. The problem is that everyone's always looking for that one thing to blame, one reason to blame. It's their fault. It's this person's fault. It's that thing's fault. Life is so far more complicated than that. And of course, so is climate and all of this. It's never just one thing. Okay? Let's see here. Wow, that's the questions, and I am just impressed with all the questions we had tonight. So, wow, it is 9:12 p.m. and I have been rocking it out, and I'm going to be a little tired, and my voice is starting to go too. So I think we're going to call it a night. I want to thank everyone for joining the chat. I really appreciate it. I hope I was able to answer your questions. Before I go, because I do this every week, so I might as well do it now. Let's take a look at the solar activity. And right now, we have two new sunspots that are starting to grow. We've had the sunspot list for 2 days. We're at 55 days. We are watching the potential that our sun could be peaking early in terms of activity by the middle of next year, and this solar activity is supposed to go on for 2 years. So this is going to be very interesting to go feedback onto that whole grand solar minimum idea. Not that we're anywhere near that, but again, I'm going to be learning a lot in the data. I do an update on the solar activity for premium members every Friday, so we'll be checking that out and see what's evolving there. But I figure I just pop that up because I get that question every week. And I think that's it. We're gonna call it a night. Thank you guys. Let's see. A couple more questions just came in. With the weekend cold front, do you see any chance of higher anticipation for tornado threat? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I am very concerned about these thunderstorms not only producing very heavy rainfall, vivid lightning, Because of the strong vertical velocities at 850 millibars and 500 millibars, along with the very strong vertical wind shear as winds at the surface are from the south and at 500 millibars are from the west, I am very concerned about tornadic activity on Saturday afternoon and evening.
Great.
Yeah, I know. I'm not exactly happy about that either.
I'm ready for fall.
Yeah, me too. Um, but yeah, I'm very concerned about that. Absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna call it a night. Thank you again for everyone watching. Thank you everyone from YouTube. Thank you everyone from the premium section. You guys did a freaking outstanding job with all the questions. Again, what can I say? Don't worry, the world isn't ending. We're gonna be okay as long as we use a little bit of our common sense and invest in a little bit of technology. Have a great night. I will see you guys tomorrow morning. And as always, stay safe out there.